We are back in the business of talking fights for UFC Fight Night. Keator versus Josh Emmett. Fresh off of UFC 275. We've barely had the time to catch our breaths. Before we get deep into fight talk, I want to remind you guys of our sponsors, Eat All Real nutrition bars. Head on over to eatallreal.com. Enter in the code word SevereMMA. Get yourself some delicious protein bars, some peanut butter. They've got it all going on at All Real Nutrition. Fair play to the lads, and head over there, enter the code word SevereMMA, and get you some. So we're going into what we like to call a hangover event after a pay-per-view, really. I think that this card is a pretty damn good card. We are kind of coming out of 275, lots of talking points, lots of emotions. Maybe we're not feeling this card as much as we should be, but we're going to get into it. Hopefully we will be towards the end. Calvin Kattar and Josh Emmett are the headline act in the 145-pound division. Keator coming off a good win over Giga Chikadze in his last out, and Josh Emmett picking up a good win over Dan Ige. In the current landscape of the 145 division, it's hard to kind of figure out where these guys fit. But one thing I definitely do know coming into this fight is that the loser will have no chance of getting even remotely close to a title shot. Even the winner might be as well. Harry, I'm going to go to you first, and just I'd love to hear your opinion on the overall landscape of the 145-pound division right now. Obviously, we have the Max Holloway fight that's coming up. We have Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez that is fighting. Pretty much all the top contenders are matched up. The division is somewhat on hold. I mean, for the history of the featherweight division, we might have spoke about before, only a handful of champions in the division since it's kind of come to fruition in 2012. But where do you think the division is at right now overall, Harry? And where do you think that these two guys fit into that division?
So I think that's a good question. I mean, in terms of where the division is right now, there are still it's still roasting in terms of the talent pool that's there, right? There's a ton of guys that are a lot of fun. We've obviously got Arnold Allen. We've got the Brian Ortegas. We've still got the fun fighters like Shane Burgos. We've got Yairs. We've got a ton of fighters. We've got the Movsar-Evloevs. I think the problem, as Shawnee and Spencer have talked sort of to death, is that we don't need rematches. Rematches, unless they are, the Valentina Shevchenko Tyler Santos fight, where there isn't a clear number one contender, unless it's Marina Rodriguez, and there was a dubious decision in the fight card itself, or in the fight itself, then we can see rematches. But rematches purely for name value and rematches to sell pay-per-views is not something I think we should be getting on board with. In terms of Kattar and Emmett, I mean, it's tough, isn't it? Right? Because if Kattar wins, and Max wins, then that's a fight that's gonna, that's not nobody's clamoring to see that one again. I think if Kattar wins in dominant fashion, then it's gonna be a big fight, right? It's gonna be a Brian Ortega, or it's gonna be a Yair, depending on how that goes, or it might be a Chang Sun Jung. It might be one of these to sort of tip him over the edge. I mean, he's ranked 4, right? So he's not that far away from a title shot with a couple of wins, provided that the title fight goes the way that I think maybe many of us are expecting it to go. But for Emmett, I mean, he's at 7 right now, and it feels like there are guys like the Movsar-Evloevs, like the Arnold Allen, and like the Giga Chikadze in some fashions that carry a little bit more of a name value. Shawnee and Graham made actually a really brilliant point on the overall podcast earlier this week, and that was saying that Josh Emmett is somebody that everyone seems to underrate because of the way that he is as a person. He's not a big smack talker. He goes in, he does his things. He hasn't got an outstanding skill set, a facet to his game. He's just a well-rounded, well put together fighter. But if he wins in dominant fashion, then again, I think we will see something. Maybe we'll see Arnold Allen and Josh Emmett, right? Maybe we'll see something similar. But I think that given the precedent that the UFC has been setting recently, in that when you're in that top 5, you are way more likely to get a title shot than if you're outside of it, right? So I think that favors Calvin Kattar should he go in here and put on a dominant performance.
Yeah, indeed it does. And I mean, he's not going to have it all too easy against someone like Josh Emmett. The guy hits like a truck. I think Calvin Kattar in his last fight against Giga Chikadze, I think after the Holloway fight, it was almost 12, 13 months off in between those fights. And, it was kind of like y'all must have forgot performance, because he really went in there and took the shine that Giga Chikadze had kind of manifested over his kind of run up the ranking, Spencer. And, it's another tough test, but another winnable one here. Would you rate the Josh Emmett fight a little bit more of a difficult task than one of Giga Chikadze? Or what are your thoughts? Like, what were your thoughts before? I think we were all a little skeptical of Keator after Max Holloway, and we can be guilty of that sometimes when we do see such a one-sided kind of a beatdown. But he really went in there and proved that he deserves to be in the top of the division in the 145-pound class.
So I'm going to be that guy that congratulates myself, because I loved Keator in that fight against Giga. Picked him and talked to him this week or last week for a story that's up now. And like he said going into that fight, like, this fucking guy's talking about championship fights. This guy's talking about Alex Volkanovski. He hasn't gotten through me. He hasn't fought anybody like me yet, and went out there and proved the point. I think this fight on Saturday is very different. Obviously, stylistically, Giga and Josh Emmett are very different fighters. Giga coming from a K1 background. Josh Emmett, big power in his hands, wrestling in his back pocket if he needs it. But it's also still kind of a fight where Calvin Kattar can go out there and just be Calvin Kattar. And I think he's one of those guys that we sort of get bogged down or lose sight of him a little bit because of that Max Holloway fight, which was such a beautiful performance for Max. And we remember those moments from Max where he's talking to the commentary booth and he's doing the look off and then punching Calvin Kattar and beat the face off of Calvin Kattar. Like, take nothing away from him. Dominated that fight. And Calvin said, fair play to him. He kicked my ass that night. I took the 12 months off because my team said there's no need to rush back. Like, let's just take our time and sort things out and wait for a right opportunity to come along. And I think he's better off having gone through that. Maybe not necessarily long-term physically, because he took a lot of punishment. I think that was the one where Max, set the record for the most significant strike landed or something like that. But, I think he's better off for it. And I think this is another fight where we can get that kind of reminder and maybe see, depending on how that championship fight plays out, Calvin Kattar punches ticket to a title shot. He's the one guy in that top mix right now that hasn't fought Volkanovski yet. Volk's making the quick turnaround here in a couple of weeks to face Max for a third time. If he gets through that, he's already beat Max a couple times. He's already beat Brian Ortega. He absolutely beat the hell out of Chan Sung Jung earlier this year. Depending on kind of how the Ortega-Yair fight goes, this may be Calvin Kattar's opportunity to hook himself up with a championship fight. And we'll see. Josh Emmett is in that same spot. He's thinking about the same things. He was here 4 years ago against Jeremy Stevens. That went terribly. He's had a bunch of injuries since, but he's had 4 wins. He's looked good in all of them. And if he goes out and, connects with one of those big left hooks on Calvin Kattar, maybe he's a guy that you just kind of hustle up while we let some of these kids finish sorting out that last step that they need to take before they get into the championship mix.
Yeah, indeed. It's going to be interesting to see because, Josh Emmett had to come back from like 2 busted up knees from the Shane Burgess fight. And it was really kind of a testament to him coming back against Dan Ige, Sean. And, he pulled off a great performance. You're, obviously coming back after a serious injury like that, you're not going to be maybe as explosive, or you're not going to be as nimble on your feet. It'll be interesting to see how he does in here. But one thing that definitely didn't disappear in that fight was the power, because he hurt Ige on multiple occasions, and he's always a danger here. But what's the kind of the story around this fight for you?
Well, as someone with a cut foot and a swollen head right now, I know what it's like to be able to push through harrowing injuries to perform at the highest level. So I know what it's like, Josh, the two of us. Do you know what? I like this fight a lot, to be honest. And the problem with it though is, and you're talking about, what does it mean in the title picture and all of that? The problem with the title picture in this division, as the lads you were alluding to there, myself and Spencer talk about it every 6 weeks. It's like, someone is it going to be Yair? Is it going to be Arnold Allen? This week we're talking about, is it going to be Josh Emmett? It's never anyone. It's just Max Holloway again. Like, and you know what's going to happen? Max Holloway will probably win that fight.
Yeah.
And what will the fight be then?
That's what I was going to say.
Against Volkanovski. What about if Max Holloway wins then? They're 2-2. They're going to have the 5th fight. But sure, if Volkanovski wins then the next one, he'll be 3-1. But Max had just won. It'll probably be a close decision. They're going to fight 15 times. Like, but this division has
best of 7.
Best of 7, yeah. I do like the NBA playoffs. Yeah. We'll go to an aggregate score of what the judges have said throughout all 7 fights.
Let's do an aggregate score on significant strikes.
Yeah. But,
Chuck out verdict MMA. Let them sort it out.
I don't even mention them cunts. But I probably shouldn't be saying the word cunts on here. Like, I cancel like, well, they are cunts. Fuck them. It's just very hard. There's some divisions. Myself and Harry did a podcast yesterday, and I was kind of saying like, "Oh yeah, Leon Edwards, congratulations! I have no interest in seeing that fight," But there are so many guys who miss out on title shots. There are so many guys who go through their whole career and they might never have had one, or they might never got back to one. Like, say even like a Ricardo Lamas, he got one, but he never got back to it, like, because the division has held up so much and he had injuries and everything. But guys even like Amir said, Betty, like Josh Emmett's probably going to be one. Whereas if the division was kind of going along and there was, I'm just looking at the rankings here. Let's say, okay, Holloway got one. Obviously, Ortega got one. Let's say Yair got one. He hasn't got one. Keator hasn't got one. Chan Sung Jung got one. Allen hasn't got one. Emmett hasn't got one. Chikadze hasn't got one. Mitchell hasn't got one. Ivalev hasn't got one. Ige hasn't. Like, if you take away half them names and half of them get title shots, then there's guys, fight like this will be very meaningful in terms of like who will fight next for the title, because we will need someone next up. Look at Taila Santos at the weekend. She got her shot because Valentina Shevchenko has been taken down contender after contender after contender. And I'm not blaming Volkanovski by any means. I'm blaming the matchmaking more than anything else. But I'm sure we'll get into the breakdown.
I really think that
this overlay doesn't work with the questions, does it?
Yeah, I really think that that Keator might fall into that category and maybe just missing out, just given the timescale of what's going on in the division right now, and it's really balancing on that fight between Volkanovski and Max Holloway. I think what might be the best thing to happen for the division is for Volkanovski to win that fight and maybe flirt with and move 100%. Up, and that will completely open up that division altogether. But it'll be, you can't guarantee that, especially with somebody like Max Holloway. Now, Volkanovski seems to have his number, but those are all fucking close fights at the end of the day. And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. Like, that's the one thing I was going to try and point out. Like, I know I said the winner of this, puts themselves in a chance. The loser of this fight is totally fucked in the title picture, if you ask me. Like with Keator, I don't think he gets back. Even with a win, I struggle to see him getting a title shot within the next 2 years. You're probably looking at Ortega. You're probably looking at Yair Rodriguez. Henry Cejudo is coming back as well. He want to move up and fight. So, I mean, it'd be a crying shame if Calvin Keator didn't get at least a chance at the top of the crack at the title. But, back to the fight, maybe, Harry, like when you're looking at this from a technical standpoint, I'd say we can expect primarily to see a striking battle here.
Yeah, I think so. I have some thoughts on this fight, lads. And I think that this boils down to who wins the exchanges, both getting into the pocket and getting out of the pocket. Calvin Kattar is a man that fights incredibly well on the inside with good head movement and slick boxing and, great footwork. Josh Emmett is somebody that explodes into the pocket. He loves a jab and a big swinging, clubbing overhand right. And obviously you mentioned the left hook earlier, right? It's gorgeous. Something that was prevalent in the Shane Burgos matchup is Burgos was lazy getting out of the pocket and just got cracked over and over and over again with that overhand right. For me, I feel as though the smarter fighter, the more intelligent fighter is Calvin Kattar. It seems as though he makes reads and is able to adapt his game plan based on those reads quicker. Kattar in his matchup with with Dan Ige was able to make the reads very quickly and then punish Dan Ige when he was in those exchanges. And I think that that's something that we're going to see, or this is the big question for me in this fight, right? The big question is, does Emmett land big shots? And does it look like Chito Vera versus Rob Font 2 a little bit, right? Where you've got a guy that lands volume and has a great gas tank, but the other guy just hits a little bit harder. And the judges are obviously going to score that more favorably. Or do we see Calvin Kattar dissuade Josh Emmett from exploding into the pocket as violently, knowing that he's going to get cracked and that Kattar's not going to be there for the big swinging shots? I think the other thing in this is Josh Emmett kicks pretty awkwardly, and when he does throw, if he throws, Kattar's going to be able to counter that. But Kattar does have some nice low kicks, does have some nice body kicks. And if I'm Calvin Kattar and I'm in Calvin Kattar's corner, I'm telling him that Josh Emmett sits super low in that stance because it enables him to explode in and out of the pocket. So if you can chop away at that leg just a little bit and do so maybe at the end of your combos or at the start of your combos, slowly over 5 rounds, that's going to add up. And I think the other big question for this is Josh Emmett's first 5-round fight since 2016. How do we see that style of Josh Emmett as Shawnee, who's also going through some severe adversity right now? How does a man coming off 2 big injuries, not bigger than Shawnee's, obviously he's still here doing God's work, but how does he come off that and then traverse that style into 5 rounds? We know Calvin Kattar can go 5 rounds. This is his 4th 5-round fight in a row. That's the questions for me.
Yeah, definitely. They're great questions, and they will be answered on Saturday night. For me, that's it. I worry for Josh Emmett a little bit going into the championship rounds here as well. I think Keator might pull away. There'll be a couple of exciting exchanges throughout the fight, but it'll be interesting. I think you'd be foolish to kind of not respect Josh Emmett's power throughout this fight, but his explosiveness moving in and getting those shots off may not be there in rounds 4, round 5, as they are like in rounds 1 or rounds 2. But maybe I'll just go to Sean and Spencer, just maybe a quick prediction on how you might see the fight going. I'll go to Sean first.
I think it's going to be an absolute war of a battle of a fucking fight. There's going to be blood and guts and oh, Jesus Christ. I watched back Yuri Prochazka against Glover Teixeira, and honestly, I think it's going to be more violent than that. Really, that would be my prediction for this fight. Both of them fight in a kind of like a technical way until it no longer is, They'll both go there. Like, I think Harry described Josh Emmett very well. And he's like a sneaky, technically very good fighter. You might even think, you think of him, I kind of said on the podcast the weekend, and I said I'd go on and look at it a bit more. You think of it, he knocks lads out, and that's how he wins. But he outgunned 2 lads technically in his last couple of fights, and he's very good. I love the way, as Harry mentioned, he kind of dips down, jabs to the body, comes back up over the top with a couple of shots, and it's not 1 shot, it's not 2 shots, it's 2, 3, 4, 5 shots coming from Josh Emmett, and that's how he gets the knockout a lot of the times. And sometimes, because they're expecting the 3, 4, 5 shots, when he throws the 1, they're not expecting, and he can hit him with it, and it's very effective for him. But he will fight in the pocket like that, and he will try to be the bully. And I don't mean that in a negative way in any shape or form. In MMA, that's a good thing to be. And Calvin Kattar isn't necessarily a bullying type of fighter, but he is a type of fighter who just never stops. He just throws an unmerciful amount of shots and goes and goes and goes and goes. And, even more importantly, almost, he can take an unmerciful amount of shots. And I'm not sure Emmett can take as many as Kattar, but I do think Emmett hits as harder than Kattar. So there is that You know, we could make the graph out, lads. I'm sure, Harry, you were over there. You could write a computer program to make out the graph to see who will win that fight. Will it be the more powerful guy with probably the less durability, or will it be the guy who has unbelievable durability with a little less power? Now, it might come to the fifth round, and that, you know, both ends of that graph end, and the judges have to decide. But what if it doesn't? Who's going to win that battle? What man is going to fall? Who is going to go out, you know, with their sword, with their fucking shield, and who's going to go out on it? And it's probably going to be that way. I think, like Aaron Bronze had to put up a thing the other day about featherweight fights not finishing and all. I think this is going to be finished. I really do. I'm not, as I said, it might go to decision, I might be wrong, but my look at this and my thoughts in this fight are the two of them are just going to throw so much leather that it's going to be a fight that someone will not be able to take anymore. That's my call on it.
I love it. I don't have to get that in now this episode. Spencer, what are your thoughts on everything that Sean said, and what's your opinion on how this fight might play out?
So I really like the earlier point Sean made about the Rob Font Marlon Vera fight, but the difference to me in this one, and obviously Rob Font, Calvin Kattar, teammates, New England Cartel, shout out to the boys, is that Marlon Vera throws a lot more different variety and a lot more different things than Josh Emmett does. And so that's part of where Rob Font has to be aware. And there's so many different things coming at him. With Josh Emmett, you kind of just have to, like, he even doesn't wrestle all that much, even though he wrestled at a good college that has produced a UFC champion and one of his coaches, Danny Castillo, Menlo College. He kind of just sits down on his punches and looks to get in a fist fight, which great for us. I think this weekend it's going to be bad for him, because I think this is going to be one of those ones. Rob Font has a beautiful jab. He beats you with his jab, and it's just jab the face off of you. Calvin Kattar, it's not quite death by 1,000 cuts. It's kind of like death by 150 cuts, because they just keep piling up, and they're a little heavier, and they're a little heavier each time. And when he gets the opportunity, he sits down on a right hand and he cracks you good. I think that's what we're going to see. And I agree with Sean that we're going to see one of those finishes that we haven't seen in this division in a long time. And I think the stat he's talking about with Aaron, the only one that we've seen finished in the last couple of years is that championship fight with Alex Volkanovski and Chan Sung Jung, which was one-way traffic. I don't think this will be as one-sided, but I think as we get later in the fight, into rounds 3, into round 4, if it gets there, Calvin Kattar kind of pulls away, and we see that fight again where he kind of reminds people, similar to the Giga Chikadze fight, that he's a legitimate top 5 guy that has proven it, that has established it, and isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
Indeed. It will be a fascinating encounter. It will be a violent encounter at the top of the card between Calvin Kattar and Josh Emmett. It'll be exciting to see how those guys do. We move to the co-main event, Donald Cerrone versus Joe Lauzon. And look guys, we can go down many roads with this one, I think. I think at the start, let's focus, I think, and look back at, in two of their unique ways, these guys in their heyday were really exciting to watch. They're always in entertaining fights. And, you know, we'd be a little bit foolhardy, as Sean likes to say, to think that we're going to get the exact same thing in this fight. But if we're going to have these two guys fighting against one another, or against somebody, I mean, at least it is against one another. Do you want to see these type of fights, Harry? I mean, look, we could go down the road where we think they both should retire. There should be this, there should be that. But at least they're not UFC aren't throwing these guys in with young killers or unrealistic matchups. You know, we're seeing two kind of lightweight legends go at it here. Two exciting fighters and two guys who always leave it on the line.
So I'm in two minds, right? One side of my brain says, do you remember Vitor ages ago asked for like a Legends division, right? Where everyone had a kind of a weight class, but if you were, if you're a Donald Cerrone, you've had 750,000 fights in the UFC, like you kind of get a Willy Wonka golden ticket, and you get to go to the Legends division, and you don't have to fight Movsar Evloev, right? You don't have to fight fucking Arman Saryukin or whoever it is. So part of me thinks that's important. and probably something, a pseudo legends division should be created, right? And we see the Matt Browns and the Jim Millers and the Donald Cerrones and the Joe Lauzons able to go at it. But in the same vein, I do think in a way it devalues what the UFC is. The UFC is supposed to be the elite of the elite when they are elite, and neither of these fellas are elite anymore. Like, is it going to be a fun fight? Maybe. I guess if both of them turn up, yeah, it'll be fun. If one of them turns up, it'll be horrendous. If neither of them turn up, it'll be equally horrendous. But to answer your question, I think I err on both sides. I think we should be respecting the legends and we should be respecting their paths and their careers. And whether that's we give them a fight under the UFC lights and we do it with sensible matchmaking, or whether it's we say, look, lads, thanks very much. Here's a couple of extra $100,000 and we'll see you later. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of thinking. I'm trying to, it's easy to shit on this fight. We could also talk about retirement for both guys. I mean, Spencer, there's more losses than wins on both of these guys' records coming into this fight. What do you think is the thought process with the two of them? Maybe Cerrone first and then with Joe Lauzon. Obviously, Lauzon picked up a win against Jonathan Pierce in his last fight. Cerrone is without a win for a long time, 2019, since his last win inside the octagon. And in an ideal world, one of these guys is going to win. But in an ideal world, you'd like to see maybe Cowboy pick up a win and then hang it up. But that's an ideal world, and we don't live in an ideal world. We're talking mixed martial arts here. And there's something that you said the last time we spoke about this fight when it was supposed to happen there a couple of weeks ago. You said something very true, and something that really stuck with me was that Cowboy Cerrone defines himself as a fighter. And when he doesn't have that anymore, what does he have?
Yeah, that's the part, and he's the one in this that is hard for me to figure out, because it feels very much like he's doing this because he's trying to hang on to something. He's trying to force something to happen that probably isn't going to happen, and that's to go out on a win. That's to go out kind of on his own terms. And he said it after one of the last fights. I think it was the Alex Morono fight, where Alex Morono takes it on short notice and comes out and just blows through Donald Cerrone, which isn't necessarily that surprising. Alex Morono, a good fighter, even on short notice. But, Cowboy gets back there and they ask him some questions and he says, like, my mind wants to do it. My brain is saying, yeah, shit, I'm still a fighter, but my body just can't do it anymore. And that's the point where you just got to go. Like, that's the point where most other people go, okay, I'm out. This is the end of it. But Cowboy's not most other people. He's been doing this his whole life. It's not even necessarily, and I think I probably am incorrect that it's what he defines himself by, but it's just so much a part of his life. And it's how he funds all the other things in his life, right? Like, he's now started to diversify. He's got some other stuff going on. He's doing some acting. He's doing some racing. He's doing a bunch of other things. So hopefully those start to produce revenue for him and give him different outlets. But it feels like he's hanging on and he's still doing this because he doesn't want to go out on a 6-fight winless streak. And he doesn't want to go out as this guy that's, stuck around too long. He wants to be able to say, I went out on a high point. With Joe Lauzon, it's the other thing. He didn't talk about retirement, but he just went and hung out and coached a bunch of fighters and, did life for 2 years since that Jonathan Pierce fight. And he wasn't in a rush to get any fights. I talked to him a few weeks ago and he said, it was just one of those things that when it came around and it's Cowboy, yeah, of course I'm taking that fight. It's Cowboy. This makes sense. This is the right fight. As Harry's saying, you don't have to go through these guys. The guy that I always think about, and I think Lauzon is far more this than Cowboy, is the Jim Millers of the world, is the Andre Arlovskis that said, and we've talked about it on this show, I still want to compete, but I know I can't be competitive with the absolute top end of this division. So let me find a place that I fit, that I can still be active, that I can still be competitive and still do this without going out there and getting my ass handed to me every time I'm in the cage. And unfortunately for Cowboy, he hasn't hit that point. Nobody has pulled him aside and had that conversation with him. I don't think he'd listen anyways, because that's just not who he is. But it's one of those, like, this is another one of those fights, and I feel like we've had a few of them lately where this one could end up real sad, because I mean, I won't speak for you guys, but I've been watching Cowboy my entire life as a fan of this. Had a lot of great conversations with him. Some of my favorite highlights are Donald Cerrone highlights, like that goddamn Street Fighter combo on Rick Story.
Amazing knockout.
It's been getting hard to watch, and I think Saturday might be as well.
Yeah, indeed. I'm kind of along the same lines where just, I even see that Lauzon, I don't know what the prices are of this fight, but I'd imagine Lauzon might go in there as slight favorite here. It could be a pick 'em fight either. I'm not sure if you've seen him either, Sean, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts maybe are overall on this fight and where both fighters are at in their careers.
Yeah, well, both fighters are finished, if we're being honest here. There's never been a fighter that I have been more sure of going 10, 15, 20 fights too far in his career than Donald Cerrone. Maybe BJ Penn, but Cerrone is one of those guys who will fight and fight and fight, and he will be getting knocked out badly at the age of 52 and making... That is Donald Cerrone. He can do nothing but fight. He is one of those lads, and it's unfortunate. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong, but that's almost inevitable for me. I think the lads have broken down well their positions and everything. So let me talk a little bit about the fight and actually the timing of the fight, because they were supposed to fight a few weeks ago, weren't they? And the fight fell out, and now they're back.
Yeah.
I don't think that benefits Cerrone at all. He's never been a mentally strong fighter. I think a turnaround like that will give him excuses in his mind for him to lose. And that's a very easy thing for me to say sitting here, and a very harsh thing to say, but I believe it, and people are tuning in for us to tell them the truth. So I will tell you what I believe. I also think if you were to pick out these two guys and say, right, Lauzon hasn't fought in a good few years, but Cerrone fought maybe a year, 18 months ago or whatever. But if you were to pick them out and they said they haven't both fought in a good while, who can pull themselves together to, I suppose, carry out their duties at the highest level when they kind of need to? I would probably say Joe Lauzon. Not to say, I think Cerrone has always prepared himself well and fought as well as he could, and he's always come in fit and trim and everything like that, apart from the one time he failed the drugs test when he was cutting weight, as Graham loves to remind us. But I just think Lauzon will... I think those two things benefit Lauzon. I think he'll be able to get himself better for this fight, and I think that short notice turnaround thing will absolutely be a benefit to Lauzon. Now, overall, I think Cerrone at his highest level versus Lauzon at his highest level, I think that's a Cerrone win. I actually think Cerrone is probably closer to his highest level than Lauzon is. He's closer to his prime, maybe. But I think Lauzon is the type of fighter who his fundamentals maybe don't rely as heavily on speed and athleticism and things like that. Like Cerrone as well is the type of guy who could be hurt by one shot, and then if the fight goes to the ground, Lauzon is unbelievable there. They both have 17 submission wins in their career, so they're both good on the ground, but I could see Lauzon taking the back here after a knockdown and choking out Donald Cerrone, but I don't know. One of the two of them will win. Let's put it that way. It might be a draw. Who knows? It's not a bad fight though. It makes sense. The matchmaking makes sense, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I think what makes it a good fight is what I was kind of saying for me anyway, is that at least these are two guys at the end of their career and they've done it all. And we can remember what they've done in the division in the past, and it'll probably be two shadows, two ghosts, if you want to call it, the ghost of Cerrone and the ghost of Lauzon in there, but at least it's two ghosts fighting each other. So for that part, I'm excited. You just don't want to see anyone getting devastatingly hurt. I'm interested. One part of this fight I'm interested to see, and I'm interested to hear what you think as well, Harry, is that if the fight does go to the ground, because Sean mentioned, Cerrone is dangerous enough off his back, has 17 submissions, as does Lauzon as well. So, I mean, it's not completely dead in the water for Cerrone if it does hit the ground. Obviously, his route to victory will be if the fight stays standing. But just give me your thoughts on maybe what you're thinking on a technical aspect for this fight.
So I can sum up the groundwork pretty simply, I think. Donald Cerrone is a submission hunter and Joe Lauzon's a grappler. So I think when you put those two together, the grappler will more often than not win. Now, obviously, if Joe Lauzon gets hurt, Donald Cerrone lands one of his high kicks or whatever he does, and Lauzon's wobbled and all about the place, then the submission hunter, I mean, that's what Donald built his game on, right? His game was built on hurting a fella and then jumping on his neck, jumping on his arm, grabbing his back and seeing what he could find. And that's no disrespect to Donald's game either. For MMA, it fits perfectly, at least in his era of MMA, it fit perfectly. But Joe Lauzon, I think, in the newer era of MMA, is more able to dominate, control, and land shots that would lead to then eventual submission. And this is what we've seen, right? This is what we've seen from Joe Lauzon in a long time. So from a technical perspective, I think pure grappling lands with Joe Lauzon, and I kind of see, I think I completely agree with Shawnee that this is where I kind of see this fight going. I think Joe Lauzon can wrestle and grapple at a much higher clip with much more diversity than Cerrone can. And equally, we've seen it before. If things don't go the way that Cerrone wants them to go early, he often looks for a way out, or he looks like he's deflated at the very least, right? Looks like it's hard for him to get back up into fights. And if I'm Joe Lauzon, I mean, I'm just doing that early, right? From the stand-up, I think, look, Shawnee said it absolutely right. If Cerrone is in his prime and Lauzon's in his prime, I think it's a tough night for Joe Lauzon, but neither of them are. And I think Cerrone is labored in his striking now. It seems awkward, it seems rigid, and it feels like you could see it from 100 million miles away. And if I feel like that, I suspect that a highly trained professional fighter can see that too. So yeah, I mean, it's a fine fight from a match. Sorry, it's a fine fight from a matchmaking perspective, but I don't think it's a fine fight from an elite level fighting perspective.
No, absolutely not. I'd 100% agree with that as well. And, you know, to kind of touch on maybe what Sean said, will probably be an important factor is that the mentality of Cowboy as well. I think sometimes you have to wait and see the first exchange in a Cowboy fight to kind of realize what Cowboy has turned up, whether it's the guy who's willing to go in there and grit his teeth and get involved in a proper scrap, or is it the one who's just looking for a way out, like you mentioned, Harry? And sometimes I even think at this stage of his career, he doesn't know that himself until he has that first exchange. So it'll be interesting to see how that fight goes in the co-main event.
Did you see him the last day as well? Sorry, just before you move on, the mentality part of it. He was crying like his son there and all, and Jesus Christ.
I don't like anybody bringing their kids to fucking fight. I don't know what they're doing. Who was it that was someone fought in a Titan fight recently, or no, it was Michael Chandler. It was Michael Chandler after the Tony Ferguson, and his kid came in over the octagon, and he was like, "Dad, are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't even take that." I'm trying to watch two guys beat the shit out of one another. I'm not able for any of that kind of stuff. It just brings this fucking real reality to the situation there. And Max Holloway used to do it. I just don't understand that. Like, it can't be good for the kids to be watching that shit either, to be honest, you know. But I mean,
damage,
each to their own.
Speaker's Corner coming to you very soon on that
one. Sorry, Sean, I kind of interrupted you there.
No, work away. That was kind of the main point. I do think the mentality for Cerrone, we've all kind of mentioned it here in different sort of ways. And that is it, isn't it? It's a main point always with Cerrone, but you never know. This is a very tough fight to break down how it's actually going to go, and we're kind of maybe looking for things, but Lauzon hasn't fought in 3 years, Cerrone hasn't fought in a year. What type of Cerrone will show up? Will the fight actually fucking happen? Who knows? But there are better fights in the card anyway.
Indeed. Another entertaining fight along the way as well in the welterweight division, from two legends onto another legend, and that's the Dirty Bird, the man himself. Tim Means is back in there and coming up against Kevin Holland, the former up-and-comer of the middleweight division and the latest up-and-comer of the welterweight division.
It's a bad move for him there. He has to be better going down to that division.
Exactly. If it ain't working out for you, middleweight, son, you got to think about it.
Go up.
Not down,
heavyweight.
But look at fucking man, Tim Means. He's just like, in the words of Harry, he's just a tough fucking bastard, isn't he? Like, being around since what, 2011, 2012, a little stint outside the UFC, but he's fought the who's who in the welterweight division. Has amassed a 3-fight win streak coming into this. Kevin Holland, who's coming in off the back of a win against Alex Oliveira, in his last fight too. You know, a similar enough test here coming in, Spencer, for Kevin Holland, kind of throwing him in there with a durable, kind of a legend style of a tough fucking fighter, and seeing what he can do. I think, you know, in some ways Tim Means would offer some more problems to Kevin Holland, but it's really a fight that Holland should be winning if he's going to be making waves in the welterweight division.
I mean, it's the kind of fight that Kevin Holland was winning when he had his little 5-fight winning streak there, and everybody got really excited about him. And then when he started fighting guys that are actual contenders, he started shitting the bed, and we saw the truth about Kevin Holland. And that's kind of just who Kevin Holland is going to go out there and he's going to talk shit to Tim Means, and Tim Means is going to punch him in the mouth, and it's going to be a good fist fight. Like, I'm really looking forward to this fight because I don't really have a true sense of how it goes. I think Kevin Holland should win. I think Kevin Holland could be a very good fighter if he actually wanted to be a very good fighter. I question whether he wants to be a very good fighter. I think he's more interested in being a personality and being famous than being the best version of himself. I think this is going to be another one of those fights that probably sucks a few people into thinking that Kevin Holland is going to be a contender in this division because, as you said, Tim Means is a tough guy that's been around since Christ was a cowboy and fought everybody and is a perennial tough out. But this is one that, like, this is the fight that if Kevin Holland actually wants to do something in this division and be somebody in this division, go out and blow through Tim Means. Go out and just have that performance where you're not mugging for the camera, where you're not talking at all. Have the kind of performance he had against Fluffy Hernandez to start that 5-fight winning streak, where you just march in there and bury him in 60 seconds, because nobody really does that to Tim Means. And so that's the piece I'm looking to see. Do we see something from Kevin Holland that says, hey, maybe he's taking a little step forward, maybe he's being a little more serious about this? Or do we get a typically entertaining, really fun to watch, give us plenty to talk about Kevin Holland fight where it still looks like he just wants to be a guy that has a lot of fun in the cage?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see. I'm going to out myself here now a little bit, and I would be one of those people that was getting a little bit excited when I seen Kevin Holland knock Sha'Carri off his back.
It was I'm going
to bring you down with me too. I'm glad you admitted, Sean. I'm going to bring you down. Sorry, Spencer.
I was just going to say, it's super easy to. He won 5 fights in 7 months. Like,
yeah, Sean is gone as well, because I know he was talking like that too.
He doesn't want to be involved. It was really easy to. He looked good, but he looked very good against a lot of middling competition and an old Jacare. And we just kind of got excited about this guy talks in fights and he does all this extra stuff.
Yeah. Totally fair. And I mean, you know, Sean might neither confirm or deny that statement that I've made, but what makes Kevin Holland such an intriguing fighter to you, Sean?
He's not that intriguing, to be honest to me. Yeah, it's like he looked good, and then he kind of got shown up a little bit, and he's another one of these guys that it feels like his own mentality is going to be his ceiling, you know. And it was embarrassing, some of them fights. Like, you very rarely see UFC fights that are embarrassing for the person in there. Some people can perform badly, or they can make a mistake, or have, you know, low fight IQ, or they can jump in a guillotine in the 5th round of a title fight that they're winning or something like that. But to like purposefully lose a fight because you want to act cool and you want to talk to Habib, that is embarrassing. And Kevin Holland has a lot to do to make that up, you know? And maybe that's the intriguing part. Maybe the intriguing part is to see if he becomes intriguing again. And him against Tim Means is a good fight. A very, very good fight. It'll be a stand-up fight, I would assume, which will suit Kevin Holland, which will suit Tim Means as well, though, to be fair. So, yeah, all in all, not too much meaning in the division. Good, fun fight. Probably will forget it happened a few weeks later, even if it's very good, and then we'll all move on.
Exactamundo. I mean, Harry, I'll go to you just to round us off maybe a little bit on this if you'd like to. Sean mentioned it. It's going to be probably a primarily striking battle here, and that will definitely benefit Kevin Holland. We haven't seen too much off of Kevin Holland when he's faced against a solid wrestler. You know, the Brunson fight was terrible for him. He's too busy talking shit rather than trying to get back up. He's not going to have to worry too much about that when he's coming in here against the Dirty Bird, is he?
No, not at all. And I think, you know, everyone's sort of packaged this up in very similar ways. But to me, there's very little intriguing in this matchup from a technical standpoint. It's all mental. It feels to me as this matchup is entirely a mental test for Kevin Holland. It is are you a shithouse or can you take this seriously, right? Because if you're a shithouse, you're probably going to get put against a couple of really fun, really, really, really good prospects, and you're going to get whacked. But they're going to use you for a press conference and for snippets here and there in the next place, right? You're going to be used to build a fighter's name rather than, you know, be taken seriously for your skill set. But if we look at Dirty Bird here, right? Sean mentioned earlier about being a bully in MMA and that it's a really, really good thing. Tim Means is a fucking bully, lads. And he will be in your face and he will put his jab in your face and he will put whatever he can in your fucking face until you don't want to be there anymore. And just quickly, let's have a very quick look at the losses. Jorge Masvidal, Castillo, Magny, Brown, Cowboy Oliveira, Bilal Muhammad, Sergio Moraes, and then, okay, Nico Price and Daniel Rodriguez. Like, okay, fine. But there's not a ton of shame in a lot of those losses. And in each of those losses, he's been beaten. He's not beaten himself. And I think for me, the big question here is, does Kevin Holland fancy himself as the second coming of Donald Cerrone, or do we see a useful fighter?
Fuck, I even think that's a compliment to even put him in the same lines as Cerrone at this stage of his career so far. I do know what you mean. I definitely do. Someone that will be looking out at that fight with great interest and who's not too fond of Kevin Holland. And you know, if things go their way, if Holland gets the win and in the next fight, if Joaquin Buckley gets his win over Albert Duraev, you know, we may very well see those two matches have been talking a lot of lip, the two of them to each other. Even this week, they're kind of talking lip to one another. Joaquin Buckley stormed into the UFC, really, you know, with that knockout of the year where against Impact and Kasangane. And then he got knocked out. I was on the receiving end of probably a very highlight reel knockout against Alessio Di Chirchio in the fight soon after that. I mean, it's a mixed bag with Joaquin Buckley. It's either he lands something spectacular or he gets hit with something spectacular. Duraev came through on the Dana White's Contender Series, I believe, had a good win on that, but didn't really set the world alight against Roman Kopylov on his UFC debut. I mean, yeah, I'm struggling to think what the UFC are thinking signing Duraev at 32 years of age. No, he's on a long win streak right now, but what really is he going to be doing in this division? I'm not too sure. I'm just wondering what your thoughts on this fight overall are, Spencer. I mean, it has
pretty much the same thing you're thinking. Yeah. What is this?
What fight? Is this like? Yeah,
I'm in the same boat with Joaquin Buckley. Like, there are moments where he looks great, and we all know them, right? The Kasangane fight, the fight with Jordan right after that was a good knockout as well. That last fight against Abdul Razak Al Hassan was supposed to be. We all went into it thinking, "Oh my God, this is going to be like two dudes meet in the middle and just throwing sledgehammers at each other," and it turned into an absolute suffocating grind. Like maybe the worst fight of the year so far in terms of like bad wrestling, bad cardio, bad everything. And so what does he have? This is a fight, I think, for both of them, really, where you come out and this is show me what you have, show me what you can do, show me why you're here, show me why I should care going forward. Joaquin Buckley talks a lot about what he's going to do, where he's going to be, what he wants to do in this division. Come and show me. Come and stop this guy's winning streak. Stop the takedowns that he is invariably going to look for and put another highlight together. And if you can't do it, kind of going to mean you're situated where you're situated. And on the flip side for Jurayev, as you said, gets a good win on the Contender Series, doesn't look good against Kopylov. It's a long winning streak, but only 2 of those have come like since 2018. So if you're doing something, you got to get going, man, because you're 32, 33 years old. And there's not a ton of time for you to be slowly working your way through the Joaquin Buckleys of the world. So there should be, and hopefully will be, some urgency from both of these guys on Saturday. But it's kind of, I mean, there's a bunch of them on this card that fit Sean's like, oh, great, middleweight. Here we go. This is one of them.
Yeah, definitely is indeed. I mean, does anyone have anything to add on this fight, or shall we move on? Brilliant, because the next fight is a fucking belter, and I can't wait to talk about two lightweights going at Damir Ismagulov versus Gurim Kutaladze. I mean, Kutaladze, amazingly enough, the last time, I couldn't believe it, the last time he was in there was that split decision win over Mateus Gamrot. That's a real fucking good win right now on paper. Came in there, fought really well, a really great striker, solid grappler as well. I mean, when your Gamrot shot in there, he was able to hang with Gamrot on the ground, landed some nice shots on the feet. Ismagulov also pretty dangerous on the feet as well. Lands a lot of damage on top. Got kind of stunned at the start of his last fight. I know it was against Rafael Alves, which was his first fight in 2 years. Kind of came out of the blocks a little slow, but then kind of asserted his will as that fight went on. But 2 top prospects coming through here, and I'm really excited to see what Kutaladze looks like coming in here, Sean. I mean, what do you make of these two? These are 2 solid prospects in a shit hot fucking lightweight division right now.
Yeah, I was just giving out to Spencer and Harry before we started recording today that now I have to go and watch fights like this because these lads make me feel bad, like if I'm not watching them. And I did, and I watched a bit of both of them. Kutaladze is just built like a brick shithouse, and he's as strong as fuck. And as you mentioned, he beat Mateus Gamrot. You are not a bad fighter if you can get past Gamrot. And I would say the same for Ismagulov. He beat Joel Alvarez, who's one of those guys as well. If you beat him, or Joel Alvarez maybe as they like to call him, you're a good fighter. I love Ismagulov's elbows. He's standing stepping elbows. They actually don't land that much. So maybe Harry will have a better breakdown of this than I have, because I probably watch more tape of him than me, but I feel like someone's going to get knocked out by one of them. Maybe there is somewhere back down through the line somewhere that I haven't seen, but he just throws them in such a lovely, terrifying way that someone's going to walk into one of them sometime. And I would say Ismagulov is maybe a more technical, I suppose. Yes.
I agree with you. Definitely technical, but I think he sacrifices a little bit of speed to get off that technique, and I think that might cause him a little bit of trouble in here. But like, doesn't like the waist shots, very tight, very composed with his striking. But like I said, yeah, watching the 2 of them, I feel that his striking is just a little bit more slower, and he think he won't get off in the exchanges as much as he'd like to in this fight, and it might cause him trouble.
Maybe. Who do you think is more powerful? I think Kutaladze, like, he looks more powerful.
Yeah,
but I don't know. It's a great fight though. It's a really fascinating fight, and I think the Ismagulov thing as well. He's the technical kind of wild shots he throws as well. Like, even wild stuff he throws, it's always in a kind of a technical manner. Martinez fighting in Bellator or on PFL this weekend is very similar. I feel like might throw in a wheel kick, but not a wheel kick from Ricardo Lamas used to throw him, and they're just wild and they could land fucking anywhere. But he throws them in a very kind of technical manner, and everything he does. And I like that sort of fighter, but I also like, I see his name as the Georgian Viking here, Kutaladze, and that really says a lot, I think, about the fighter that I saw when I went back watching them.
It absolutely does. I think Kutaladze is also a training partner of Hamza Chimaev as well, trains out of Sweden All-Stars. So, he's in a good pedigree of fighters there. And if you're getting some work in with Hamza, I know he's getting some good work in as well, don't you, Harry? Just
probably training with Darren Till as well, though. So, you lose some.
Harry, coming into this fight, I kind of alluded to the differences on the differences. What's that? That's not even a word. The differences of both guys striking. I mean, 2 don't get me wrong, two very good strikers, but I think the speed advantage probably would favor Kutaladze. One thing that really impressed me when Ismagulov does manages to get the fight down, he is very active on top, will beat up your body, will beat up your head, will just stay landing punches no matter what, which is something I really like to see if you are going to take the fight down. Problem is with Kutaladze, if you're looking at Mateus Gamrot, who couldn't keep him down, I don't think that Ismagulov is going to be able to keep Kutaladze down in this fight either. So I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on both of these fighters.
I mean, if I could, I'd just refuse and say it's going to be absolute fucking chaos and I can't wait for it. But I will go. I will go a little further. I mean, look, I think Shawnee sort of stole my point, and that's the Khamzat Chimaev thing, right? Like, if you're in that room, you're going to have Khamzat Chimaev hanging off your hips daily. And in your training session, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's an hour and a half. If you manage to get up twice, you've had a fucking great session. Right. And what it means is when you get in that cage and you feel somebody that's not the same power, that's not the same width, that's not the same technical ability as somebody like Khamzat Chimaev, you're probably thinking, lads, I'm all right here. I think on the feet, you touched on something really, really important, which is speed. But I think range is important as well, right? Kutaladze is a very long fighter. He's, you know, Shawnee, as always, so eloquently and poetically and beautifully stated, your man's built like a brick shithouse, lads, you know? And he's right, you know? He has long arms, long limbs. And whilst Ismagulov has great takedowns, and when he gets there, lands great power and great damage, the problem with landing damage is what? You give your fighter an opportunity to get up. You give him room. You have to let go of his hips. You have to let go of his shoulders at some point to land that damage. And I think if Kutaladze can carry on getting up, I don't think he's going to get hit with one of those step-in elbows because the range is so different. And I mean, I feel like I'm leaning towards Kutaladze here. I think he hits hard, he strikes well, he's hard to hold down, and that feels like a bad matchup for Ismagulov, but it will be a cracker.
It absolutely will. I 100% believe that as well. I think, you know, maybe one big question over Kutaladze is that how will he respond after that time away from the cage? I guess that fight with Gamrot has happened a little while ago now, Spencer. Who do you fancy to come out on top in this one?
I like Kutaladze as well. I mean, in addition to training with Khamzat Chimaev, he's been training with a bunch of those Georgian fighters like Merab Dvalishvili, like Ilya Topuria and his younger brother, who's also somebody to keep an eye on coming forward at some point. I mean,
that's so weird. Well, sorry to interrupt you. When I was watching him, I was like, he reminds me of Ilya Topuria, and I couldn't remember his name. It was like the hand sanitizer lad. He does. He fights like him, doesn't he?
And I mean, as Shawnee said, he's built in such an intriguing way for this division. I think more and more people are starting to understand and appreciate the value of that win over Mateusz Gamrot. And even if you want to say, he probably didn't deserve the nod, fine. He went 15 minutes neck and neck with Mateusz Gamrot, which, you know, no one else in the UFC has done yet. And so this feels like one of those fights where, because it's been a little bit of time since that fight, we're kind of sleeping on him a little bit. We also haven't touched on the fact that Damir Ismagulov missed weight by about 97 pounds last time out and got pulled from that card in Abu Dhabi on October 30th. And so he needs to fight the scale first. He needs to beat the scale on Friday and make sure he makes it. And look, I know, Harry, fuck weight cutting. I agree. But he's got to hit that number first. And so that's a battle. He needs to make sure that happens because there's this great big Georgian Viking that's going to be in there ready to take his head off on Saturday night.
Indeed. Julian Marquez is coming back against Gregory Rodriguez, and that fight will open up the main card. I writing notes on this. One thing I like to mention is that injuries have really hampered Marquez in his career so far, haven't they, Spencer? And the other one, the other note I wrote down is like, Rodriguez loves a scrap, and I'm sure that Marquez will oblige, which will probably end up bad for him.
Yeah, I mean, he had more than 2 years off with just a horrible, it was like his bicep and lat and just tore it all off, and it was awful. Had to have a couple surgeries. Looked like he was on the road to coming back and having a really good year last year. Got those 2 finishes in, I think, like 3 months apart, and then disappeared again. And so It's that inability to stay healthy. Rodriguez is going to come across the cage and sling hands at him. We know that. We've seen that in every fight he's in. I'm interested to see if Julian Marquez can become somebody in this division, because this is a winnable fight. He's a big, burly dude. He's clearly got a good nose for a finish, knows how to get a guy out of there when he gets them hurt or he sees an opportunity. Can he do it, and can he stay healthy? Those are my questions going into this one. I don't know, because Rodriguez hits like a truck and is going to put it on him, but we'll see.
We sure will see. It will be interesting. I think, Father Time is catching up on Marquez now with those injuries and stuff in 32 or 33, I believe at this stage. We're going to just pick a couple off the undercard here. I'm going to skip down and then I'll come back to you, Spencer, just to give you a little bit of a break. Harry, you kind of Eddie Wineland versus Cody Stamann on the undercard here is something that kind of turned your head a little bit, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a rough old matchup for Eddie Wineland, isn't it? Fucking hell. I mean, you go in, you get absolutely fucking murked by Sean O'Malley, and then they're like, sure, lads, have John Castaneda. Like, Jesus, all right. And then they're like, okay, boys, Cody Stamann's looking for a win, so here's that contract. And you're like, fuck me. Like, Cody Stamann is a big, burly 135er that hits pretty hard and can wrestle. So you give him Eddie Wineland? It doesn't seem like a great matchmaking to me, but Stamann would probably come in and probably run through him in a round, and we'll be going, oh, look, Cody Stamann did a thing, I mean, yeah.
That's it. Poor old Eddie Wineland. Court McGee comes back. Oh, I'm trying to say actually about Court McGee. I as a guy who got into mixed martial arts through looking at Chuck Liddell, last weekend it was a fucking great sight to see John Hackelman in the corner of Glover Teixeira. I just love seeing it. He gave the sign in the weigh-ins and everything. It was fucking brilliant to see. John Hackelman gets another spin out this weekend with Court McGee. Hopefully things will go a little bit better for him. Court McGee at this late stage of his career, racking up 2 wins, going for the 3rd one in a row against Jeremiah Wells in the welterweight division. I think he has enough to kind of get a win in that fight too, so that would be great to see. Spencer, before we wrap it up, I'd like to kind of get your thoughts. One of the fighters that you picked out of the card on Saturday night is Adrien Yanez against Tony Kelly. When Tony Kelly isn't saying some colorful stuff in corners, he actually fights sometimes. I think Tony Kelly, I looked at a couple of his fights. I think he is a dogged fighter, sloppy striker, and I think he's probably going to be on the wrong end of a loss here, or the right end of a loss, depending on what way you think of him and or his thoughts on Brazilians. Harry does not agree, but I'm going to go to you. Why pick Adrien Yanez as your kind of fighter to watch this Saturday night?
I just think everything he's done so far and everything that I've seen in those 4 victories in the UFC point to a guy that has a lot of the tools, a lot of the pieces I look for as somebody in this division that can continue to move forward. I don't know if that means he's got championship material. I don't know if it's top 5, top 10, where he sort of maxes out. But at the absolute least, he is going to be a consistently entertaining guy that is out there in good, fun scraps. I think I likened him to Pedro Munoz as maybe the come in and replace Pedro Munoz as Pedro gets a little bit older and fades out of the top 10, top 15. The fight with David Grant was all kinds of fun. The victory against Gustavo Lopez before that, nice patient performance where he's not rushed. Same with the Randy Costa fight. He's just a kid that is down to fight. He'll take his lumps. He doesn't get overly bothered by getting punched in the face. And then he's going to fire back. And he's got good counters. He can beat you either going forward or being the guy playing the counter. And I think in this fight against a guy like Tony Kelly, who I don't think is particularly great, and now he's got a little extra motivation to go out there and lump on this dude for what he said in the fight with Andrea Lee. And everybody jumped right away on Adrien Yanez and was like, hey, man, can you do it for us? And he was like, yeah, I got you, Brazil. It's good. I'm going to go and slam on your man here in a few weeks. And it's a hometown fight. It's a home state fight in Texas. I think this is an opportunity for Adrien Yanez to go out and show out and get himself into one of these bigger fights in the 135-pound weight class.
Yeah, indeed. I think Tony Kelly is a way, way, way worse version of Davy Grant, who Yanez bet in his last fight. So I think this is kind of a little bit of a step down in competition for him. But look, watch Tony Kelly go out there and knock Yanez out and make a fool of me.
I think
I don't think it's going to happen, though, really.
If he
I don't think he'll knock him
over
out.
the bar in the 74th minute of the Munster final, he can surely go out there and beat Adrien Yanez.
He surely can. I wonder, is he any good? I wonder, will he come out with the hurl and do a few sideline cuts and the side?
Be a good weapon to have, wouldn't it?
Right. He might need it in round 3 against Yanez. Harry, I'm interested to get your thoughts. You seem to like you have a couple of thoughts on this fight before we wrap it up.
Yanez gets hit too much and there's too much fluff in his game. Tony Kelly is very aggressive. He's happy to come forward. He's happy to bob and weave. Go and look at the Randy Costa performance for both. Yanez got absolutely fucking battered in the first round of that fight. Battered. Now, Spencer's right. He didn't look all that phased. He was like, fuck, my nose is bleeding. I guess we'll just keep going forward. But when you get hit with that many jabs from a guy in Randy Costa who doesn't have a supreme jab, and you're still trying shoulder rolls and you're still trying this and that, something tells me that something is wrong. Now, it looks like he's starting to close those holes in his game, but Tony Kelly is somebody that is very aggressive and is very in your face, and he's massive for the weight class. That he also throws a lot more strikes than a Davy Grant throws, right? Davy Grant's looking for a pop shot left hook. He's looking for a spin this. He's looking for and I think for Adrien Yanez, that's perfect. I'm going to get 1 or 2, or the max I'm going to get is 3 from somebody like Davy Grant. I can take one of those and I can land back. I can stick in that pocket. Whereas Kelly will throw a bag of shit at you. And if you're Adrien Yanez, you can't be too comfortable just taking and trudging through the depths of hell, hoping that your man's going to tire out and that you can outland him. I don't think that's a smart strategy, and I don't think it's going to pay him well in the future. If he's able to go out and put some patient performances together, like we have seen in some of his recent fights, I'm on the bandwagon. But right now, he gets hit way too fucking much for a guy that has some beautiful upper body movement and some beautiful footwork. He just gets hit too much. And I think against Tony Kelly, he's going to get hit a lot.
Indeed. It'll be interesting to see. Also, a shout out to Kyle Dawkins and Roman Duledze, who will also fight in the middleweight division on the prelims. Sean Sheehan, fight of the night. Who is it?
Can I just say as well, and Spencer might get mad at me here, this is a fucking shit card. This is rubbish.
What?
Fucking who's gonna lose between Phil Hawes and Darren Wynn? That's not who's gonna win. Like this is card.
Darren Wynn loses that fight probably.
The undercard has a
Darren Wynn loses that fight.
The undercard's fucking rubbish. Like, who gives a shit about any of these fights? Let's be honest there. Like, just if you Yaz Davisi, who the fuck is she against Christina Silva? Take that away.
Don't be bad mouthing the one Canadian on the card.
Take away
2 of the people on the show live in Canada.
Take away Ricardo Ramos.
We care.
Take away Maria Oliveira, never heard of her. Take away Eddie Wine, he should be retired 10 years ago. Take away Phil Hawes and Darren Wynn, put him in PFL where they should be. Roman Duledze, he's not bad actually. And Kyle Dawkins, he's shite. Take away all of that, give us the top 5 or 6 fights, and let the rest of it be on fucking Fight Pass or somewhere else so we don't have to watch it and we can all have more fun. Are we all agreed on that?
Stick them all on a road to the UFC. Road to the UFC.
Road to the UFC. Road out of the fucking UFC is where them lads should be.
Jesus.
I still watched all the Road to the UFC.
Oh my god.
We're all going to watch every single fight on Saturday night though, like the degenerates that we are.
I'm actually not.
Oh my god.
Yeah, this is the first
one. Birthday party or something.
I have a birthday party, yeah. So this is the first card. Maybe that's why I'm shitting all over. I'm like subconsciously saying, it's got to be no good.
T-Sheehan, where the T stands for tipsy.
Yeah.
Tipsy be fucking lit. You.
Keep an eye out Twitter, because you know Shawnee with a few in him. Shawnee without a few in him is dangerous on Twitter. I can only imagine with a few tipples there under the old loose lips will be going late into the evening on Saturday. yeah, might be best. Well, there you have it. We'll be back again next week to talk about next week's UFC card, which I don't even know who is headlining right now, but we'll be there anyway. Yeah, we'll be there right now.
Boys. It's Armin Saryukin and Matoish Gamrot.
Yes. Oh shit, son. That's a good one. That is a good one. And we'll get primed up for that. Go and follow Spencer Kite. Sign up to the Keyboard Kimura. BJJ_Harry Powell. You can see them all on the screen. Check out the Severe Spotlight. Check out Harry and Spencer's podcast on Keyboard Kimura each Sunday as well. They've freshly started that residency and it's a great podcast. Hit up Sean Sheehan on Sherdog.com. Interviews, UFC, Bellator. He fucking does everything. Don't give him a follow. He's not looking for followers anymore. Hit up the rest of the lads. Catch me on the Owl Triangle. Catch me here before every UFC card. Catch me on Twitter. Sean, you may have the last word, and you're not allowed to show the Limerick flag either.
MMA Journalist of the Year 2021, Sean Sheehan. If we're being honest.
Yeah, I'll allow it.
I'll go on. Not, if we're being honest.
Does that mean we kind of have to have an award for you next week then? Or?
Who else is in the running? It's basically just me, I would say. I don't think there's anyone close. No offense to any of you, but
what would it be? You'll get the speech for services to judging criteria mixed martial arts. The reward goes to Sean Sheehan.
For love of Damon Jackson and middleweight.
They definitely have to fucking play the music. They definitely have to play to get you down off the stage if they give you that one. Yeah, that one.
There'll be people shouting robbery if that ever fucking.
Yeah, exactly. Before we leave, head on over to All Real Nutrition Bars, eatallreal.com. Enter the code word SevereMMA. Get yourself some delicious protein bars. Irish made, Irish company, Irish legends like the majority of us here. Thanks all for listening. We'll be back again next week. Maybe Wednesday, maybe Thursday. Who knows? But we'll be back one of those days. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.